Tune into learning at Resonance Talks. Tune into learning at Resonance Talks. Tune into learning at Resonance Talks. Tune into learning
So imagine walking into a high-end university research lab right now, today.
Okay, picture that.
You look around and there's this incredibly complex experiment happening. Like the literature is being systematically reviewed, a highly specific testable hypothesis is being formulated,
Right.
and the Python code to run the statistical analysis on that hypothesis, it's being written and debugged in real time.
It's just an incredible flurry of academic work.
It really is, but here's the catch.
Yeah.
There is no human in the room.
Right?
And even wilder, there is no human at a computer somewhere else typing out prompts to make this happen.
That's the crazy part.
The system was given a single broad goal weeks ago, and it decided to orchestrate this entire scientific process on its own.
It is a genuinely staggering reality. And it represents a fundamental fracture in how we understand our relationship with our own tools.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we are so accustomed to the idea that a tool is passive. A hammer waits for a hand.
Right.
Even the incredibly advanced software we used just a few years ago waited for a keystroke. But now
the tool is autonomous.
Exactly.
And for you listening, if you are someone who loves a good aha moment, if you want the ultimate shortcut to understanding where the future of learning, and really the future of our entire knowledge economy, is actually heading, you are exactly where you need to be.
Absolutely.
Because today, we are diving deep into an exhaustive, highly detailed 2026 research report that covers the global transition to what is called Agentic AI in education.
It's a massive shift.
It is. And the mission of this deep dive is to answer a question that feels almost dangerously large.
Which is?
Is the traditional educational paradigm, the one you and I grew up with, completely dead? And if it is, how on earth are we going to govern the autonomous systems that are rapidly replacing it?
That's the big one. And to even begin answering that, I think we have to contextualize the timeline.
Okay, let's do that.
Because for a lot of people, AI still feels like that quirky novelty from a few years back.
Like a toy, almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we rewind to 2023 and 2024, that was the era of the initial technological shockwave. We all remember when large language models first became widely accessible to the public.
Oh, yeah. People were absolutely mesmerized that a website could write a sonnet about their dog.
Or, draft a moderately polite email to their boss.
Right. It was the honeymoon phase. Everyone was just playing around with it, trying to break it, making it talk like a pirate.
It was pure experimentation. But the report we are looking at today is grounded in the reality of 2026.
And that novelty, it has completely evaporated.
Completely. What has replaced it across the global educational landscape, from elementary schools to Ivy League universities, is the gritty, complex, and highly arduous reality of systemic integration.
We aren't marveling at parlor tricks anymore.
No, we are dealing with the plumbing of human institutions. We are tearing out the copper wire and putting in fiber optics while the building is still occupied.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that infrastructural shift, it fundamentally changes the conversations happening in the real world.
It completely changes the debate.
Right. If you walk into a university administrative office today or, sit in on a school board meeting, the debate is no longer that philosophical hand-wringing question of, oh, should we let the students use it?
That ship hasn't just sailed, it has crossed the ocean.
The macroeconomic pressures, coupled with the rapid, almost violent maturation of the technology, have forced everyone's hand.
They really have. The discourse has transitioned entirely to a deeply operational and, frankly, terrifying ethical dilemma.
Which is simply, how do we govern a machine that thinks for itself?
And that is such a critical pivot.
It really is. But to understand this governance problem we're facing, we first have to understand the beast we're trying to put a leash on.
We have to look at the definitional shift of the technology itself.
Because the AI we are talking about today is fundamentally not the AI you were playing around with 2 years ago.
Not even close.
We are talking about the leap from generative copilots to agentic autopilots.
And that distinction, that is the bedrock of everything we are going to discuss today.
So break that down for us, generative versus agentic.
Well, generative AI, which was the standard of that 2023 to 2024 era, operates fundamentally as a reactive copilot.
Reactive, meaning it waits for you.
Exactly. It requires continuous, explicit human prompting.
Yeah.
You ask it a question, it retrieves and synthesizes information.
You give it an outline, it writes the essay.
It is highly capable, yes,
Yeah.
but it is intrinsically dependent on your continuous oversight to move through any kind of complex workflow.
The moment you stop typing, it stops thinking.
Precisely.
It's reactive. It's like a very smart golden retriever waiting for you to throw the ball. If you don't throw it, it just sits there staring at you.
That's a great way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But Agentic AI, the 2025 and 2026 standard detailed in this research, is a massive qualitative leap.
Because it's an autopilot.
Yes. These systems are engineered as self-contained, goal-based entities. They are capable of pursuing complex, long-horizon objectives with minimal to absolutely zero human intervention.
Okay, stop right there because this is where the terminology always trips me up. How does a string of code pursue a long horizon objective without me sitting there pressing enter over and over? What is actually happening under the hood?
It comes down to a fundamental shift in computer science architecture. According to the research, a system is operationally classified as agentic when it demonstrates a specific triad of capacities.
A triad, okay. What's the first one?
First, it must be able to take a high-level conceptual goal.
Like what?
Let's say you tell it, ensure this specific student understands the concept of dividing fractions by Friday.
Okay, that's a pretty broad goal.
Exactly. And the system autonomously maps that broad goal into a sequence of actionable micro-steps.
So it figures out the lesson plan itself.
Right. Second, it has to maintain a persistent memory of past interactions to inform its future behavior.
So it remembers what worked and what didn't.
Precisely. And third, and this is the absolute crucial piece, it utilizes reflective frameworks to self-correct.
Reflective frameworks? What does that mean? You mean it evaluates its own work?
Yes, it actively critiques itself in real time. The contemporary architectures use what are called planner executor models.
Okay.
Two major ones mentioned heavily in the literature are REACT, which stands for reasoning and acting,
Reasoning and acting, got it.
and reflection.
A reflection with an X.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here, think of it as an internal dialogue the machine is constantly having with itself.
So it's talking to itself.
Essentially, yes. It formulates a plan, it executes a step, and then it observes the result of that step. It then reasons about that observation.
Asking itself if it worked.
Right. It continuously asks itself, did that action move me closer to the goal? Did the student understand that prompt? No. Okay, the student's response indicates confusion. I need to discard this approach and generate a new pedagogical strategy.
Okay, so let me see if I have this right. It's like generative AI was like having an intern.
Oh, definitely.
You have to give the intern excruciatingly detailed step-by-step instructions like go to the filing cabinet, open the third drawer.
Pull out the Smith file, read page 2, and give me a 3-bullet summary.
Exactly. And if the intern goes to the drawer and the Smith file isn't there, they just freeze.
They don't know what to do.
They come back to your desk and say, what do I do now?
Yes. But Agentic AI sounds more like a veteran manager.
It really does. You walk into their office and say, we need to increase third quarter sales by 10%, and you just walk out.
You just leave them to it.
Right. They figure out the subtasks, they delegate, they hit roadblocks, they pivot their strategy, and they just get it done.
That is the perfect conceptual translation.
Yeah.
You are shifting from interacting with technology as a passive instrument to managing technology as an autonomous collaborator.
You aren't writing the steps. You are only defining the destination.
Exactly.
Which sounds incredibly efficient if we are talking about a corporate marketing department.
Sure.
But my immediate pushback here, and I think a lot of people listening are probably feeling this right now, is that we are talking about education. We are talking about the cognitive and emotional development of human children. If this thing's an autopilot, aren't we just handing the steering wheel of a child's brain over to a machine?
I know it sounds...
That feels intensely dystopian.
It is a profoundly unsettling thought, and it is the exact fear driving much of the resistance we will talk about later.
Yeah.
But to really grapple with that fear, we have to look in the comparative operational capabilities outlined in the sources. How is this veteran manager actually manifesting in a classroom setting? Let's look at tutoring, for example.
Okay, right. Because the old way, the generative AI way, was essentially a glorified cheat code.
It really was.
A student would take their math homework, snap a picture of it or upload the syllabus, ask the chatbot a question, and the bot would just instantly spit out the correct answer.
Maybe with a little explanation attached if you were lucky.
But it didn't coach them, it just gave them the output.
Which is why educators initially panicked. It bypassed the learning process entirely.
But the agentic advancement in 2026,
It's the deployment of what the report calls Socratic tutors.
Socratic, like the philosopher, asking questions.
Exactly. These are autonomous agents designed to actively guide students through complex concepts, and their primary directive is to almost never provide direct answers.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Because they operate on those reflective frameworks like React, they can monitor a student's input in real time.
So they're watching as the student types.
Right. And when a student gets a math problem wrong, the agentic tutor doesn't just say incorrect, the answer is 4.
What does it do?
It analyzes the student's erroneous work, identifies the specific logical fallacy the student is suffering from, and dynamically generates a new, highly targeted question to force the student to realize their own mistake.
Wait, so the AI is intentionally enforcing intellectual struggle?
It is engineered to create productive struggle.
Productive struggle.
Yes. It will generate infinite practice problems, dynamically adjusting the difficulty down to the decimal point, continuously scaffolding the concept until the student independently bridges the cognitive gap.
That is wild.
It refuses to give the answer. It forces the student to arrive at it themselves.
It's not a calculator, it's a sparring partner.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
But what about the administrative side? Because anyone who has ever worked in or attended a large school knows they are essentially giant, bloated, slow-moving bureaucracies.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the sheer operational efficiency of an agentic system becomes staggering.
Give me an example.
Think about the generative copilot in an administrative context. It was basically an FAQ bot on the university website.
Like a student asks, how many credits do I need to graduate?
And it links them to a generic PDF.
Super helpful. Not.
Exactly.
Yep.
But the agentic autopilot acts as a full-stack digital concierge.
What does a digital concierge do?
Let's say a transfer student comes in. The agentic system can autonomously evaluate a complex, messy transcript from a community college.
Which is usually a nightmare for human admins.
Right. It cross-references it against the university's degree requirements, identifies potential scheduling conflicts for the upcoming semester, and then proactively executes a multi-channel enrollment marketing campaign to guide that specific student through incredibly complex elective selections.
Without a human administrator ever touching a piece of paper.
Zero human intervention. The system perceives the overarching goal and role and schedule this transfer student optimally, and it executes the dozens of microtasks required to achieve it.
And the report goes even further when it comes to research at the university level, which circles back to that crazy scenario I mentioned at the start of the show.
The virtual labs.
Yes. The sources detail how we are moving from asking an AI to just outline a literature review to the deployment of full-blown virtual labs.
The virtual labs are perhaps the most potent example of multi-agent orchestration.
Okay, break that down for me. Multi-agent orchestration. That means it's not just one AI brain doing everything.
No, imagine a team of highly specialized experts. You don't just have one generic AI. You have an AI trained explicitly in advanced statistical modeling.
Got it.
You have another agent trained entirely on parsing historical literature.
Okay.
Another trained on writing clean, executable Python code.
Wow, so they all work together.
Exactly. You give the system a single initial prompt, a broad research question. The manager agent delegates the tasks.
Like a real lab director.
Right. The literature agent scours millions of papers and summarizes the gap in the current research. It passes that to the hypothesis agent, which formulates a testable query.
And then?
That gets passed to the coding agent, which writes the script to scrape data and run the test. They check each other's work. They autonomously debug the code if it fails.
It's a whole team of robots arguing with each other.
Essentially. And finally, they synthesize a comprehensive, peer-ready research report.
From a single human sentence.
Yes.
And for you listening, I want you to really pause and think about the extrapolation of this. We are talking about the education sector right now.
But it doesn't stop there.
No. If universities are already utilizing full virtual labs to conduct autonomous multi-agent research in 2026, how soon until similar autonomous agent teams become the absolute standard in your workplace?
It's coming.
Whether you are in corporate marketing, global logistics, finance, or human resources. If a multi-agent AI team can autonomously evaluate a college transcript, map out a 4-year degree plan, or run a statistical analysis on novel research, it can absolutely map out your supply chain logistics or run your Q3 marketing campaign.
It is industry agnostic. The underlying framework of mapping goals to actions applies everywhere.
It's everywhere.
But this brings us to a crucial realization about why this is happening so fast in schools specifically.
Right.
The adoption of this technology in education isn't just because administrators love shiny futuristic tools.
Yeah.
It is a desperate existential rescue operation for an industry that is fundamentally on the brink of collapse.
Let's dive deep into that, because the systemic crisis driving this adoption is severe, and it's not something the tech companies created.
Not at all.
We are looking at a massive structural global teacher shortage, driven by completely crushing, unsustainable administrative workloads.
The data points the report provides here are incredibly stark. In the United States, for example, the average public school teacher is working roughly 53 hours a week during the academic year.
53 hours. And the kicker, the part that makes my blood boil, is that the report notes 25% of that work is entirely uncompensated.
1/4 of their labor.
1/4. It's just donated time.
It is invisible labor.
Exactly. It's the teacher sitting at their kitchen table at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, color-coding spreadsheets, inputting grades into a clunky district database, and writing complex, individualized education plans.
You cannot sustain a critical public industry on that kind of exploitation.
You just can't. The human body breaks down, people burn out, they leave the profession in droves, and the system collapses.
Which is precisely why Agentic AI is being embraced so aggressively by educational institutions. It fundamentally recalibrates the temporal economics of the teaching profession.
Temporal economics, meaning how they spend their time.
Yes. The empirical studies cited in the report, multi-site trials across diverse districts, show that deploying these high-readiness autonomous systems yields a quantifiable, reliable 25% reduction in administrative load.
A 25% reduction.
Yes.
Yeah.
That translates to an average savings of roughly 6 hours per week per educator.
6 hours a week. That is a monumental shift in quality of life.
It changes everything.
That is getting your Sunday afternoon back. That's being able to actually eat dinner with your own kids instead of grading the homework of someone else's kids.
Exactly.
And how is the machine actually clawing back those 6 hours? Because it's taking over all the routine, non-instructional, mind-numbing, repetitive tasks, right?
Yes, the baseline grading, the data analytics orchestration, the drafting of those massive compliance documents.
It handles the bureaucratic friction.
But where it truly revolutionizes the teacher's workflow is in its capacity for complex differentiation.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. The report details a specific framework called the FACET system.
Yes. FACET.
Now, let's take a second to explain differentiation for anyone listening who isn't a teacher.
Contort in context.
The modern pedagogical ideal is that you cannot just stand at the front of a room and teach one standardized lesson to 30 different kids.
Because every kid is different.
Exactly. In that room, you have some kids reading 3 years above grade level, some reading 2 years below.
You might have a student with severe ADHD.
Or a student with a visual impairment, or someone who is learning English as a second language.
And theoretically, you are supposed to tailor the core lesson for everyone's unique needs.
Which is a beautiful idea.
It is.
But it's virtually impossible for one human being to execute manually every single day across 5 different class periods.
It is arguably the great unsolved problem of modern pedagogy. We demand intense, personalized differentiation from our teachers, but we do not provide them with the time or the human resources to actually achieve it.
It sets them up to fail.
It creates a perpetual sense of failure for the educator.
So, enter the FACET system. This is a teacher-facing, multi-agent framework. Let's role-play this for a second. Imagine a teacher, Mrs. Davis.
Okay, Mrs. Davis.
Under the old system, to differentiate a lesson on the Civil War, she would spend 3 hours finding a high-level text for the gifted kids,
Then rewriting a simplified text for the struggling readers.
creating an audio-visual component for the visually impaired student.
And building a highly structured, interactive worksheet for the student with ADHD.
It's exhausting just saying it out loud.
It takes hours.
But with the FACET system, Mrs. Davis defines the nuanced learner profiles of her 30 students exactly once at the beginning of the year.
Just once.
Then, on a Tuesday, she inputs her core curriculum goal: teach the economic causes of the Civil War.
And then,
In a matter of seconds, the multi-agent system autonomously generates curriculum-aligned, accessibility-compliant, highly differentiated materials, reading levels, and interactive modules for all 30 distinct learning needs instantly.
it completely removes the crushing manual labor of adapting a single lesson dozens of different ways.
While entirely preserving the human teacher's authority over the core curriculum itself.
It is the automation of the preparatory work, leaving the teacher free to execute the actual delivery.
But this raises a massive red flag for me.
Okay, what's that?
6 hours a week saved is incredible, but does that time actually go back to the teacher so they can rest, recharge, and avoid burnout? Or does the school district administration just look at that newly freed up time and say, oh, great, you have 6 free hours. Here is a new committee you have to chair. And by the way, we are increasing your class size by 10 students.
That is the perpetual danger of efficiency gains in any structured system, isn't it?
Absolutely. The machine speeds up, so management just demands more output.
The institutional expectation is always maximum extraction. However, the pedagogical argument here, and what the initial 2026 research actually supports, is that this saved time allows for a vital pivot in how the teacher spends their energy in the classroom.
A pivot to what?
It allows educators to shift away from being isolated data entry clerks and move toward high-value socio-emotional interactions with students.
Meaning they actually get to be mentors again.
Precisely. And the AI actively facilitates this mentoring through a capability the researchers term anticipatory insight.
Anticipatory insight. What's that?
Because these agentic systems are so deeply integrated into the digital learning platforms the students use, they continuously analyze what is called behavioral trace data.
Hold on, trace data. Are we talking about keyloggers? What does the machine actually see when a kid is sitting there doing their digital homework?
It sees micro-interactions.
Like what?
Time on task, hesitation patterns, mouse hover durations, the velocity of keystrokes.
The velocity of keystrokes.
Yeah, how fast they are typing. It sees the specific iterative failures on practice problems. The AI algorithms are capable of analyzing this massive stream of trace data to identify patterns that a human teacher can never spot across 30 kids simultaneously. It uses this data to flag students who are struggling in high-risk gatekeeper courses well before any critical academic failures actually occur.
Wait, so if a kid is taking a calculus module, the system isn't waiting for the kid to bomb the midterm exam a month from now.
No, it notices on week 2.
It notices on week 2 that the kid is hovering their mouse over certain types of variables for an unusually long time, indicating they fundamentally misunderstand the baseline concept.
And it flags the human teacher immediately.
It generates a real-time alert.
It essentially taps the teacher on the shoulder and says, Student A is beginning to fall off the cognitive path.
So the teacher, who now actually has those extra 6 hours a week freed up,
Can intervene proactively.
they can pull that student aside, sit down with them one-on-one, and provide that irreplaceable human empathy, nuance, and guidance to get them back on track before they even realized they were failing.
Which bridges us beautifully to the most important question of this whole transition.
Right. Taking administrative work off a teacher's plate is fantastic for the adults, but the ultimate goal of a school is student success.
We have to look at how these systems actually perform in the classroom when the rubber meets the road.
Are the kids actually learning better?
And this leads us to what the researchers define as the hybrid sweet spot.
The hybrid sweet spot, I like that.
To answer your question about student success, the report relied on a massive systematic literature review. They aggregated 82 distinct, peer-reviewed, and industry studies.
Wow, 82.
Yes, published between January 2023 and February 2025.
A systematic review. I love that because it means we aren't just looking at one rogue cherry-picked study,
Right?
funded by some AI startup trying to sell a software license.
Exactly. It filters out the noise. This is the rigorous synthesis of all the hard data out there.
So what did they find?
Well, the paradigm-defining insight they arrived at is so counterintuitive to the tech utopian narrative.
Okay, hit me.
They found that hybrid classrooms consistently and overwhelmingly outperform fully autonomous tutoring systems.
Wait, really? So you're saying that if you just give a kid the most advanced, super smart Socratic AI tutor and let the machine teach them entirely on its own, the kid actually learns less effectively than if a human teacher is involved?
Emphatically, yes.
That is fascinating.
The optimal configuration for human learning relies on a very specific, deliberate division of labor between the silicon and the carbon.
Between the machine and the human.
Right. The AI handles the highly personalized, repetitive cognitive tasks. It delivers the infinite practice problems. It provides the immediate granular scaffolding.
It does the heavy lifting on the drill.
Yes, it operates perfectly within what educational psychologists call the student's zone of proximal development.
Which is that sweet spot of pushing a kid just hard enough that they are learning, but not so hard that they throw their hands up and quit in frustration.
Right. It delivers immediate, adaptive, perfectly calibrated feedback. But the machine cannot care about the student.
It has no biological stakes.
Therefore, the human instructor handles classroom dynamics. The human handles emotional engagement, empathy, relationship building, and second-order pedagogical decisions.
Because an AI cannot read the subtle tension in a room.
No. It cannot look at a student and sense that they are distracted not because the math is hard, but because their parents are going through a messy divorce and they didn't sleep last night.
The human handles the holistic environment. The AI handles the cognitive micropathways.
And when you pair those two things together, the empirical outcomes are honestly staggering.
What do the numbers look like?
According to the data and the sources, schools that implemented this specific structured hybrid AI curriculum reported a 25% to 35% higher student engagement rate in STEM fields.
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yes. And even crazier, they saw massive 40% to 50% gains in computational thinking scores.
50% gains.
Those are effect sizes that traditional educational researchers dream of finding. A 50% gain in computational thinking fundamentally alters a student's trajectory.
It proves that the human element is not becoming obsolete. It is simply being repositioned to its highest and best use.
Precisely.
It reminds me of a surgical team in a modern operating room.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Think about a complex surgery today. The AI is the robotic arm.
Right.
It can make hyper-precise sub-millimeter micro-incisions that a human hand physically cannot replicate without trembling.
Utterly perfect at the micro task of cutting.
But you would never just leave the robotic arm alone in the room with the patient.
Never.
The human surgeon is the one standing there, looking at the holistic monitors, interpreting the vital signs, making the ultimate life or death strategic decisions, pivoting the entire surgical plan if something unexpected happens.
And ultimately, the human doctor is the one who looks the patient in the eye.
Holds their hand and comforts them before the anesthesia kicks in.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The robot cuts, but the human heals. If we connect this to the bigger picture for everyone listening, I want you to consider the profound implications of this across all industries.
Yeah, think about your own job.
The narrative of AI has largely been one of pure replacement, but the data from education suggests a different reality. The technology elevates the human's role to an orchestration level.
You move up the chain.
In your own career, you move from being the laborer doing the manual calculation or drafting the routine memo to being the conductor overseeing the symphony of automated labor, applying the human judgment that the machine lacks.
But, and this is a massive structural but, we have to temper this excitement.
They do.
Because despite these incredible gains, despite the 50% boost in test scores and 6 hours of save time for exhausted teachers, there is fierce, highly organized, and deeply legitimate resistance to this transition.
And to truly understand what is happening in 2026, we have to step out of the tech utopian bubble and look incredibly closely at the robust counter-narrative.
It is essential that we engage with these critiques. They aren't just Luddites complaining about new tools.
No, they're pointing out systemic risks that could fundamentally break public education and exacerbate social inequality if ignored.
Now, before we go further, it's really important to lay our cards on the table.
Oh, definitely.
The 2026 report we're reading today, it includes some very intense, politically charged critiques.
Yes, from civil rights groups, pedagogical purists, policy centers.
Right. And to be absolutely clear to you listening, our job today isn't to take a side.
Not at all.
We aren't endorsing these civil rights critiques, nor are we dismissing them. As observers of this data, we just have to look at the arguments they're raising impartially.
Because they point out some massive structural risks that, frankly, every citizen should understand.
So let's start with the primary structural critique, articulated heavily by organizations like the National Education Policy Center or the NEPC.
Their central concern is rooted in political economy, specifically what they call the creation of inescapable corporate stacks.
Corporate stacks. What does that actually mean when we are talking about a public high school?
It comes down to the physical reality of artificial intelligence. Running large language models and multi-agent systems is not magic.
It takes servers.
It requires massive, almost incomprehensible amounts of computing power. It requires hyperscale data centers, millions of gallons of cooling water, and staggering amounts of electricity.
And is incredibly prohibitively expensive to operate.
The NEPC argues that massive tech firms are effectively utilizing public education budgets to defray these computing costs.
Defray the costs, so they're passing the bill to the public.
Precisely. By convincing schools that AI is essential, they are locking public school districts into expensive, proprietary software ecosystems.
You stack.
Yes, the corporate stack. You buy their hardware,
Right.
their cloud storage,
Okay.
their foundational models.
And their agentic software.
You're locked in.
So it's fundamentally a wealth transfer.
That's the argument.
They are extracting public funds taxpayer money that was theoretically meant for local schools and transferring it straight into private corporate hands in Silicon Valley.
Exactly. And the critique asserts that this redirection of essential financial resources occurs at the direct expense of hiring human beings.
Because the budget is finite.
Right. If a district spends millions on AI licenses, they are not hiring more human educators
Or counselors.
or school psychologists or nurses. It commodifies the educational experience, turning students into endpoints for a software license, and gives private, for-profit entities unprecedented opaque control over the structure and content of public education without any meaningful democratic oversight from the community.
That is a massive macroeconomic concern. But beyond the money, there's also a deeply philosophical one. The sources detail the arguments from pedagogical purists who warn against what they call the degradation of pedagogy.
They argue that treating AI as a panacea is incredibly dangerous because these systems, no matter how good they are at simulating a supportive conversation, fundamentally lack genuine empathy.
They lack lived experience.
They lack ethical reasoning. They are entirely mechanistic.
They are just predicting the next most likely token in a sequence of text to mimic empathy.
The fear from these educators is that an over-reliance on AI tutors will result in a rigid, deeply isolating model of instruction. Education, historically and biologically, is fundamentally a social endeavor.
It requires collaborative negotiation.
It requires looking at your peers, reading their facial expressions, arguing a point in real time, and experiencing the friction of human consensus.
If a student's primary intellectual interaction from kindergarten to graduation is with a perfectly compliant machine that caters to their every whim,
It could severely damage their psychological and cognitive development. They might lose the ability to navigate complex human relationships.
and on top of the philosophical fears, there is a very practical, on-the-ground reality that completely contradicts the whole time-saving narrative we talked about earlier.
A hidden labor problem.
Yes, we celebrated teachers saving 6 hours a week, but the critics loudly point out this profound, insidious issue.
Because these models, both generative and agentic, are ultimately trained on vast, uncurated oceans of web data.
They hallucinate.
They confidently invent facts.
They just make things up.
Exactly. They stitch together unrelated concepts and produce highly convincing text,
That contains utterly false or misleading information.
presented with absolute grammatical certainty. And what the sources call curricular misinformation becomes a daily nightmare for the teacher.
It creates a massive wave of hidden labor. Because now, instead of just grading a student's original thought, which a teacher can do relatively quickly, the teacher has to rigorously fact-check and audit these massive AI-generated outputs.
Let's say a student uses an AI research assistant to generate a 10-page history report on the Cold War.
Okay.
If the AI subtly hallucinates a series of diplomatic meetings that never actually happened, or invents a fake historical quote,
It takes the teacher twice as long to research and verify those specific hallucinations as it would to just sit down and grade a normal human-written paper.
which entirely negates many of the purported time-saving benefits. The teacher isn't resting. They are just doing a different, much more tedious type of work.
And beyond the hallucinations, managing complex, multi-agent classroom environments requires specialized technical proficiencies that most educators simply do not possess.
And the data shows they don't have those proficiencies yet.
Look at the raw numbers from the report. 72% of teachers are profoundly concerned about academic integrity and the erosion of original thought in their classrooms.
And while 68% of educators acknowledge that AI is an important skill for the future, only 20% to 25% feel adequately prepared or trained to use it effectively themselves.
Only 20 to 25%. The professional capacity gap is severe. You have a workforce that is entirely overwhelmed by a technology they are expected to seamlessly integrate.
So let me synthesize the critic's point here, because it feels like a powder keg.
Please do.
Are we telling overwhelmed teachers who are already underpaid and working 53 hours a week that they suddenly have to become IT managers for a complex multi-agent AI system they were never formally trained on, specifically so they can spend their nights fixing historical hallucinations the system shouldn't be making in the first place?
It's absurd when you phrase it like that. Are we just treating public classrooms like involuntary beta testing labs for tech billionaires?
That is precisely the question the critical literature is asking. And it is compounded by a technical reality known as the black box problem, or algorithmic opacity.
The black box, meaning we don't actually know how the AI reaches its conclusions.
Yes. Think of algorithmic opacity like baking a cake in an incredibly complex dark oven.
Okay, a dark oven.
You put the raw ingredients in, flour, sugar, eggs,
Mhm.
and you close the door. But inside the oven, invisible hands decide to add cinnamon, change the temperature, and reshape the pan.
And when it comes out?
You have finished cake, but you have absolutely no idea what process occurred in the dark to create it.
That's creepy.
Many of these agentic applications utilize neural networks with billions of parameters. Their internal decision-making pathways are entirely opaque, often even to the software engineers who originally built them.
So let's go back to our earlier example of anticipatory insight. The AI analyzes trace data and flags a student as at risk of failing calculus.
But why did it flag them? Was it because they were slow on a specific fraction problem, or was it a bizarre correlation the AI found between the time of day they log in and their demographic profile?
What untraceable computational parameters led to that conclusion?
We don't know. The machine just gives us a red flag and essentially says, trust me, this kid is struggling.
And when you accept that trust me, the transparency and accountability of educational decision-making are severely compromised.
You are shifting instructional authority away from trained human pedagogues who can articulate their reasoning to a parent, over to proprietary black box algorithms that cannot explain themselves.
If a parent asks, why was my child placed in the remedial track? The teacher can only answer, the software told me to.
Who is actually in charge of the student's trajectory?
If these black box algorithms are making untraceable decisions about which students are at risk, who suffers the most when the machine gets it wrong?
And that leads us straight into the most intense, visceral ethical crisis of this entire technological transition. We have to talk about tiered realities and data colonialism.
The central ethical crisis dominating the 2026 discourse is the massive exacerbation of the digital divide. But it is crucial to understand that the discourse has evolved. We are no longer just talking about what policymakers call the first-level digital divide.
Right, the first level divide was just about hardware access.
During the early days of the internet, and especially during the pandemic, the question was simply, do you have a physical laptop? Do you have Wi-Fi at home?
Exactly. It was a binary issue of access. Now, the research indicates we are dealing with second and third level divides. This is no longer just about whether you have a device. It is focused on digital design, digital use, and systemic algorithmic bias.
It is creating a deeply entrenched, tiered reality for human development.
The sources paint a stark, honestly brutal picture of a bifurcated educational landscape. You have wealthy districts and affluent households on one side.
And what do they have?
They are buying the premium multi-agent Socratic AI subscriptions. They have the massive broadband capacity to run them without lag. These students are interacting daily with highly sophisticated AI mentors.
They are actively learning how to direct and manage autonomous agentic teams, like those virtual labs we discussed.
They are gaining elite, advanced AI literacy that mirrors the skills needed in the modern high-end workforce.
They are learning to be the elite orchestrators. They are learning to command the technology.
Exactly. Conversely, you look at high-poverty districts, inner-city schools, or rural districts.
The report shows that high-poverty districts are 53% less likely to have AI-trained teachers.
53% less likely.
And structurally, the infrastructure just isn't there. Globally, only 40% of primary schools even have reliable internet.
In rural areas of the least developed countries, that number plummets to 14%.
And even in the United States, 60% of students surveyed say their classroom internet is simply too slow to support these advanced bandwidth-heavy AI tools.
So what happens to those under-resourced students? What is their daily interaction with AI?
They are stuck with the restricted, generic, free versions of AI. the reactive chatbots.
The freemium models that act more like basic search engines and lack all the sophisticated reasoning, memory, and personalized scaffolding of the premium systems.
It's an educational postcode lottery. If you are born in the right zip code, you get a personalized digital Aristotle. If you are born in the wrong zip code, you get a digital encyclopedia from 2023.
It creates an insurmountable inequity in cognitive skill development. The affluent students learn to confidently command the technology to build worlds. The marginalized students learn to passively consume the outputs of a highly restricted tool.
And the attempts by public institutions to make the technology safe actually make this inequity so much worse.
Yes.
Let's unpack the walled garden paradox mentioned in the report, because this is fascinating and so painfully counterintuitive.
Public schools are understandably terrified of violating federal privacy laws.
They have a legal mandate to protect student data under regulations like FERPA and COPPA in the U.S.
Right, so they can't just let kids loose on open commercial AI tools because those commercial tools ingest user data to train their global models.
The corporate extraction of public data we discussed earlier, the schools have to stop it.
Right, so to comply with privacy laws, the schools build walled gardens.
Walled gardens, meaning localized, highly secure, deeply restricted AI environments that operate strictly within the school district's digital perimeter.
The data doesn't leak out.
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly responsible, right? Safe, secure, localized.
But here's the paradox. By walling it off, by neutering its connection to the broader internet and restricting its capabilities, you inherently cripple the AI.
It becomes a shadow of the real thing.
The artificial institutional guardrails, designed for legal safety, prevent the development of authentic, real-world AI literacy.
Think of it this way. It's like learning to drive in a bumper car at an amusement park.
Oh, I like this analogy.
You are completely safe. There is a massive rubber ring around you. You physically cannot go over 5 miles an hour, and you are plugged into a safe ceiling grid.
It's a perfectly secure environment.
But then you turn 18, you graduate, and the real-world job market expects you to instantly know how to race a Formula One car on an open track in the pouring rain.
Wow. The public school kids protected by privacy laws are getting safe, heavily restricted bumper car AI,
And the private school kids.
whose parents just buy the open access premium commercial models on their home Wi-Fi. They are driving unrestricted, real-world F1 cars every night.
When they both apply for the same job at 22, the public school kid doesn't stand a chance.
That is a terrifyingly accurate analogy of the current skills gap. And the inequity goes even deeper than access or walled gardens.
It is baked into the very mathematical architecture of the AI itself. This is the concept the researchers term data colonialism.
Now, what does that mean? Data colonialism sounds like a massive geopolitical issue, not a classroom issue.
Well, it's both. AI models, especially the foundational large language models that power everything else, are overwhelmingly developed by a handful of mega corporations in the global north.
Primarily Silicon Valley.
Right. And these models are trained by scraping the historical internet.
Wikipedia, Reddit, digitized books.
Corporate websites, yeah. But that historical internet overwhelmingly represents dominant Western cultural, socioeconomic, and linguistic norms.
It's the language of the white, Western, middle, and upper class.
Exactly. So you have behavioral and linguistic data being extracted from diverse global populations.
But it is being processed through an algorithmic standard that is calibrated entirely to the assumptions of Silicon Valley engineers.
Okay, so what does that actually look like when it hits a classroom in a diverse city? How does data colonialism impact a teenager doing their homework?
It manifests as profound automated algorithmic bias.
Let's go back to our black box predictive analytics. The system trying to figure out if a kid is struggling. Suppose a marginalized learner interacts with the AI. Perhaps it is a student who speaks a non-dominant dialect, or a student who uses African American vernacular English, or AAVE.
Or a student from an indigenous community whose linguistic structure values indirect storytelling over blunt linear thesis statements.
Exactly. The AI receives their prompt or their essay. Judging them against its massive data set of dominant Western linguistic norms, the machine misinterprets their dialect or cultural framing as an error.
It might silently flag them in the system as at risk, academically deficient, or requiring remedial intervention.
Not because they don't understand the complex concepts, but simply because their cultural vernacular deviates from the machine's baseline norm.
Wow, so the system literally misinterprets cultural difference as a cognitive deficit.
Yes. And because it thinks they are deficient, the AI automatically generates simplified remedial curricula for them. It dumbs down their education.
It suffers from what sociologists call cultural mismatch, which crushes student engagement.
The technology, in its raw form, does not inherently democratize education. Without highly intentional, inclusive algorithmic design at the foundation level, it actively reproduces hard codes and scales our existing systemic biases directly into the educational workflow, but hides it behind the veneer of objective mathematics.
Let's just pause for a second and let the weight of that sink in. We are looking at a landscape with massive structural inequities.
We have existential threats to student privacy and cognitive development.
We have the literal automation of cultural bias through data colonialism.
We have a technology so incomprehensibly powerful, it acts as an autonomous virtual lab researcher.
With all these massive structural, ethical, and technological earthquakes completely upending the very foundation of human knowledge.
Yeah.
Why on earth are schools still forcing kids to sit in rows, be quiet, and take standardized multiple-choice tests with a number 2 pencil?
It is the great paradox of our time.
It really is.
And it brings us to the most damning and perhaps the most darkly entertaining conceptual framework in the entire 2026 report.
The dead horse theory.
Yes.
So what does this all mean?
Well, the experts in this report are basically saying that the traditional model of education,
The obsession with rote memorization.
the rigid lecture-based instruction,
The endless standardized testing.
and the singular focus on long-form essay writing,
It's irrevocably, undeniably dead. The horse has expired on the side of the road.
the empirical evidence, and, more importantly, the labor market realities overwhelmingly support this conclusion. The traditional model was built for the Industrial Revolution.
For decades, human resource departments at major corporations have known that traditional educational credentials, getting an A on a multiple-choice history exam, increasingly fail to predict actual real-world job performance or innovative capacity.
Because the real world doesn't ask you to memorize the exact dates of the French Revolution while sitting in a silent room without looking them up.
The real world asks you to look up the dates, synthesize why they matter, and present a strategy based on that history to your team in 5 minutes.
Exactly. And now the sheer capabilities of agentic AI have actively, aggressively undermined the traditional lecture and exam model. Take traditional long-form writing, for instance.
Oh, this is the spicy part of the report. The idea that writing the traditional 5-paragraph essay is obsolete.
English teachers everywhere just felt a shiver down their spine.
The report argues, quite bluntly, that automated systems can already perform complex, long-form writing tasks flawlessly, instantly, and in virtually any language.
The traditional pedagogical argument is that we must preserve unassisted essay writing solely because it is the only way to build critical thinking.
But the researchers note that this argument is rapidly losing ground to the massive economic efficiencies enabled by AI.
If a university is charging massive tuition primarily to teach students traditional long-form writing and basic coding syntax, they're essentially preparing those students for a professional environment that simply no longer exists.
They are teaching them to be human calculators in the age of the microchip.
The horse is dead. But instead of dismounting, the educational institutions just keep trying to ride it.
And the researchers outline the satirical coping mechanisms that schools use to avoid true reform, and I found this breakdown hilarious but deeply, deeply sad. It perfectly captures how bureaucracies panic.
They are engaging in the symbolic behaviors of performative compliance. They want to look busy without actually changing direction.
Exactly. Okay, so the horse is dead. The first coping mechanism the report lists is buying a stronger whip.
This is when schools implement draconian zero-tolerance policies aimed strictly at raising those obsolete standardized test scores instead of improving holistic learning.
They cut recess, they cut art class, they drill the kids harder on test prep, they just whip the dead horse harder, hoping it will somehow get up and run.
Then there's the strategy of changing the rider.
Right, engaging in superficial policy shifts. The school board gets mad about test scores, so they fire the superintendent, they bring in a new, highly paid principal with a fancy new slogan.
But they keep the exact same broken, obsolete curriculum.
And my personal favorite, rebranding the horse.
Yes. Giving old assessment models new, progressive-sounding buzzword names to appear innovative, while secretly utilizing the exact same underlying multiple-choice frameworks.
They send a newsletter to parents saying, "We aren't doing standardized testing anymore. We are transitioning to synergistic knowledge benchmarking."
But you walk in on test day, and it's just a kid filling in bubbles on a Scantron sheet.
It is all driven by a profound systemic institutional inertia. Large systems resist change.
But I have to ask, if the horse is so obviously dead, if everyone from the tech CEOs to the HR managers to the teachers themselves knows the standardized test is meaningless in an AI-driven world, why don't they just dismount?
Why keep up the charade? Why stress the kids out over a test that doesn't matter?
Because they are trapped in what the report calls the compliance trap.
Educational systems are not agile startups. They are massive, heavily regulated bureaucratic entities.
They prioritize operational stability and legal compliance over genuine innovation.
But more importantly, you have to look at the financial structure. State funding, district budgets, and individual teacher evaluations are inextricably tied to the outcomes of those outdated exams.
You always have to follow the money.
Always. Systemic accountability pressures force local school authorities to rely heavily on legacy exams. The report mentions major global examples: NAPLAN and ATAR in Australia, the Tajihi in Jordan, the SPM in Malaysia.
Because the school's operating budget literally relies on hitting metrics on these rigid tests, teachers are forced into performative compliance.
They might pretend to adopt new, dynamic pedagogical strategies to satisfy the administration's demand for innovation, but behind closed doors, they shut the door and teach exactly to the test.
Because if the test scores drop, the school loses its funding and the teacher loses their job.
They're economically forced to spend months teaching human children how to pass a test that a free artificial intelligence app on their phone can already pass perfectly in 2 seconds.
It's absolute madness. It's
Yeah.
a colossal waste of human potential.
So what is the solution? If the old model is dead, if the horse is gone, what replaces it? What should we actually be teaching kids?
The report outlines a new, heavily researched, skills-based educational model prioritized entirely around what they call durable skills.
If an agentic AI can instantly automate pristine writing, flawless coding, and perfect data memorization, what is left for the human brain to do?
The answer is active learning. Things like live, unscripted debates, high-stakes role-playing, and dynamic socio-collaborative problem-solving.
Things you have to do in real time, on your feet, in a room with other unpredictable human beings.
Precisely. The educational system must urgently pivot to prioritize genuine, chaotic creativity, complex ethical reasoning, emotional intelligence, and the profoundly difficult ability to negotiate, motivate, and lead human teams through uncertainty.
These are the durable skills. They are inherently messy, highly social, and they are the exact capacities that AI currently cannot replicate or automate.
And this realization that we have to fundamentally rewrite the code of human education to survive this technological shift leads us to the culmination of this report.
Because despite the walled gardens trying to hold the tech back, despite the data colonialism, despite the school boards beating the dead horses with stronger whips to pass outdated tests,
Despite all this massive institutional inertia, the horse is finally being dragged away.
the transition to agentic AI is happening full force right now.
Whether the legacy school systems like it or not,
It cannot be stopped. The dam has broken,
and there are several massive, undeniable imperatives driving it forward.
forcing governments to finally act.
First is geopolitical urgency. AI development has severe path dependencies.
Explain path dependencies in this context, meaning the path you choose early on dictates where you end up.
Exactly, and you can't easily turn the ship around. The foundational architecture of an AI system and the societal laws built around it become exponentially harder to change once they're deployed at scale.
If nations wait to establish rules, ethical frameworks, and integration architectures until after the technology is already universally embedded in every school and hospital, it is vastly more expensive and significantly less effective to regulate.
The international drive for what the report bluntly calls computational intelligence superiority is forcing federal entities to mandate integration immediately before they fall behind rival nations.
You see this intense focus from the OECD initiatives globally and the flurry of White House executive orders in the U.S. trying to wrangle this.
And then there's the economic imperative, which I think is the most visceral, compelling data point for anyone listening who has kids or is just trying to navigate the workforce themselves.
According to the PwC Global AI Jobs Barometer cited in the research, workers who possess verifiable AI skills earn an average 43% wage premium over their peers in identical roles who lack those competencies.
Think about the reality of a 43% premium.
It's staggering. Let's say you have two junior marketing analysts sitting at adjacent desks. They have the same degree, the same experience. Analyst A writes their reports manually.
And Analyst B uses an agentic AI team to scrape the data, run the predictive models, and draft the strategy.
Analyst B isn't just a little faster, they are operating at a fundamentally different scale of output. If Analyst A makes $60,000 a year, Analyst B is making nearly $86,000. That is the difference between struggling to pay rent and buying a house.
And Stanford research backs this up, showing that job postings requiring AI skills are growing 3.5 times faster than the broader employment market. We are rapidly moving into an economy where 92% of jobs require advanced digital skills.
The report literally states in plain language that failing to teach AI orchestration in public schools is a form of educational malpractice. You are actively, knowingly bankrupting a student's future economic viability if you don't teach them how to orchestrate these systems.
Which is precisely why the legislative landscape violently pivoted in 2025. The politicians finally looked at the macroeconomic data. The discourse shifted from the philosophical should we to the panic-driven how do we govern it.
In 2025 alone, all 50 U.S. states, Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., introduced some form of AI legislation. 38 states enacted roughly 100 specific binding measures to try and control this transition.
Like Arkansas clarifying intellectual property laws for AI-generated content, deciding who actually owns a brilliant essay written by a machine prompted by a student.
Or Montana passing the right to compute law to manage computing risk in critical infrastructure. The government is finally waking up to the reality that this is utility-level infrastructure. So looking at all this chaos, how do we actually govern it?
The report synthesizes an ultimate strategic framework for schools and institutions to survive this. It requires cohesive, standardized, and highly technical national strategies.
The report lays out 4 non-negotiable pillars. First, institutions must establish dedicated AI governance teams.
And crucially, these cannot just be tech bros and software engineers. These teams must include veteran educators, legal experts, ethicists, and local community stakeholders who are continuously monitoring these autonomous agents to ensure they operate within the ethical boundaries of the specific community.
Second, data minimization. We have to enforce strict legal compliance on how data is handled. The report highlights utilizing advanced techniques like federated learning and differential privacy.
Federated learning means the AI model trains itself locally on the student's device, so the student's raw behavioral data never actually gets sent to the corporate cloud.
Differential privacy means injecting mathematical noise into data sets so that an individual student's identity can never be reverse engineered from the data.
We have to use these tools so we aren't feeding our children's behavioral trace data into a corporate meat grinder for targeted advertising.
Third, we need continuous mandated risk assessments. We must conduct transparent third-party audits of these algorithms to detect and kill the racial, cultural, and linguistic biases of data colonialism we discussed earlier, catching those algorithmic errors before they impact a single student's academic trajectory.
And finally, a tiered implementation strategy. This addresses the walled garden versus F1 track paradox.
The recommendation is heavy supervision and strict guardrails in the lower grades, letting the kids ride the bumper cars when they are 8 years old.
But then, purposefully and systematically removing those guardrails as students age, intentionally exposing them to the friction and danger of open AI models, so they actually build real-world, open-track F1 racing literacy before they graduate and hit the job market.
It is a comprehensive, technically demanding roadmap for societal survival in an age of autonomous tools.
So if I'm synthesizing all this, to survive this transition, to ensure the public education system doesn't entirely collapse into a dystopian two-tiered society, we have to do several massive things simultaneously.
We have to bridge the digital divide by literally subsidizing premium AI licenses and high-speed broadband for poorer districts.
We have to kill the standardized test and dismount the dead horse once and for all.
And we have to completely transition our teachers from being exhausted 53-hour-a-week data entry clerks into highly respected expert orchestrators of these multi-agent systems.
That is the mandate of the 21st century. It is the only way forward.
Okay, we have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. For you listening, let's recap this journey.
It's been a long ride.
We started by looking at how the cute novelty of the generative AI copilots of 2023, the glorified chatbots that wrote bad poetry, has completely given way to the complex, autonomous, agentic autopilots of 2026. Systems that use reflective frameworks to think, critique themselves, and pursue long-term goals without us.
We saw how this technology, through systems like HalfAsset, is a desperate, necessary attempt to save our teachers from crushing workloads, literally giving them a whole day of their life back by automating the bureaucracy of differentiation.
But we also face the severe systemic realities of that automation. We looked at the restrictive walled gardens, the extraction of public wealth by corporate tech stacks, the terrifying algorithmic opacity of the black box where decisions are made in the dark, and a deeply fractured two-tiered educational system that threatens to automate and scale our worst cultural biases under the invisible guise of data colonialism.
But through all of that complexity and risk, the empirical data points to a genuinely beautiful reality. The human being is not obsolete. The hybrid sweet spot proves that when AI handles the rote scaffolding and the repetitive microtasks, and humans are freed up to handle the empathy, the nuance, and the dynamic emotional connection, human potential and student engagement skyrockets.
The old dead horse model of rote memorization is gone forever, replaced by a desperate, highly compensated need for durable, uniquely human skills.
And that is the most crucial, actionable takeaway for you, the listener. Understanding this massive shift isn't just about debating school policy at a PTA meeting or reading academic theory. It is about recognizing how autonomous agents are fundamentally reshaping the exact skills valued in your own career right now, today.
The true wage premium in the job market of tomorrow will not be on your ability to compute data, format a spreadsheet, or draft a flawless document. The machine does that perfectly.
The premium will be placed squarely on your human empathy, your capacity for complex, messy collaboration, your ethical reasoning, and your ability to act as the visionary conductor, orchestrating the incredible intelligence of the machines around you.
Which leaves me with one final kind of wild, provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day, driving in your car, walking the dog.
Let's hear it.
If agentic AI eventually becomes perfect,
Okay.
if these autonomous multi-agent teams become utterly flawless at mapping out our overarching goals.
Organizing our daily workflows.
Right. Instantly recalling all historical data and providing all the perfect hyperlogical scaffolding for our entire lives.
Yeah.
Will our distinctly human flaws,
Oh, wow.
like our unpredictability, our irrational bursts of creativity, our emotional outbursts, our messy intuition.
Our sheer, unadulterated weirdness.
Yes. Will those eccentricities suddenly become the most prized, unautomatable, and highly compensated skills of the 21st century?
That is fascinating.
Will the most valuable thing you can be in an age of perfect logic simply be human?
It certainly makes you completely rethink what it actually means to be the driver of your own life.
It really does. You might not be holding the mechanical steering wheel anymore, but you are the only one with the soul and the vision to decide if the destination is actually worth traveling to. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. We will catch you on the next